Hey, everybody. Happy Sunday evening. The last Sunday evening of the Trump presidency. Cheers to that. It is, it's weird. It's a weird time. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're talking about this as always. I take a lot of solace from these talks, a lot of energy from these talks. I think they're important. I think what we're doing is important. But I have to tell you, it's an odd moment to be waiting on this inauguration, to be a few days removed from an actual coup attempt that we're still piecing together. A picture started to emerge. We're starting to understand what happened here, who was involved, what the different factions were, maybe what some of the goals were, how it got carried out. But at the same time, we're now looking at an inauguration here in just a couple of days. We've been waiting for years to get to the end of this administration. And here we are. And meanwhile, the same people who have been threatening this country and putting us all in danger for way too long right now have put us in a situation where we're just sort of waiting to see if the other shoe drops, waiting to see if we can get to an inauguration without violence, without mass tragedy or mass casualties. The entire world is watching us right now to see if our fabled peaceful transition of power is going to take place. Which I assume that you have all heard one time after another. America has a peaceful transition of power. We are the envy of the rest of the world. And here we are, waiting to see if it can happen, waiting to see if it gets pulled off, waiting to see if violent insurrectionists, white supremacists, white terrorists, whatever you want to call them, waiting to see if they're going to strike in a couple of days, almost like we're checking our watches, waiting on them, or if they're going to choose another time when we're, expecting it less. Meanwhile, the nation's capital is just it's a military zone. The seat of power of the United States of America has been turned into a military zone. I mean, we've known for decades now that we've been living in a national security state, a police state. My God, we've paid for it. I mean, the money that could have gone to take care of healthcare, infrastructure, education, all of our different human projects, all of that money, by the way, didn't save us from 9/11. It didn't save us from mass shootings. It didn't save us from a coup attempt at the nation's capital, supposedly one of the most secure buildings in the world. Makes you think about all that money, doesn't it? Makes you think about all that time, effort, and energy. And over the next few weeks, they're probably going to start talking about more legislation to crack down on domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, I mean, the Patriot Act is still on the books. It didn't do anything except for, oppress free speech and give the government another weapon to go after people. It's just a lot of horse shit. And here we are waiting to see if our inauguration goes off without some sort of major act of violence. It's one of the most surreal moments that I could have imagined. I mean, living in it obviously has been just absolutely surreal, but it has just been, it's otherworldly. It really, really is. And here we are. And luckily, we've been talking about this for a while. We've been preparing for it. We've been thinking about it. We've been wrapping our minds around it and preparing ourselves. And I have to say, I've had conversations with people over the past couple of weeks, people who come and hang out on Sundays, people who listen to the podcast, people who, read the same books and have the same conversations. We weren't surprised to see what happened on January 6th. We knew that it was a possibility. We knew that this is where Trumpism and the GOP was heading in that direction. But it's been surreal. It's been absolutely surreal watching both having it come into reality, but also watching the way others have been reacting to it, what it's brought out from them. Just watching people once again fail to rise to the moment, even when it's happened. It's surreal. And here we are, a couple of days out from the inauguration of Joe Biden. And it looks like Donald Trump isn't going to be there, which we knew. We knew that wasn't going to happen because he's a coward. He's a soft, brittle, brittle coward. And meanwhile, here we are wondering if the next president is safe. And we don't know. We've been seeing Secret Service agents who have been relieved of their duty because they couldn't be trusted to protect the president or the vice president. We now know that there are people at the Capitol who either moved to the side or were outwardly complicit. We know probably that one of the two major parties had individuals. Well, we know that they gave comfort and abetted these people, but maybe some of them might have actually given logistical information and helped with the planning and or funding. We're sitting on a tinderbox, just an absolute tinderbox. And it feels so strange to be sitting here. And we've been waiting on this thing, and we've been thinking about this thing, and we've been wrapping our minds around it and preparing for it. And here we are. And it feels so odd and so surreal. And I just want to say, before we get to any questions and before we get to the main conversations of the night, we deserve so much better than this. We deserve so much better than this. All of this was predictable. And I say that to the people who were just actively complicit, the people on the right who we told them left and right, like, this is what happens. This is where you're going with this thing. Here's the only direction possible for this thing to go. But also the people who should have known better and should have opposed it and should have called it what it was, instead of wringing their hands and saying, well, let's not call it fascism right now. Like, it's really troubling, but let's not call it fascism. And, Donald Trump is corrupt and dangerous, but I mean, let's not overblow the threat. We deserve better than that. But a step further, and this is important in all of these conversations, because once more, our media, our politicians, people who should know better, journalists, they're missing this whole thing. And they are peddling such a simplified explanation of what has happened. It was a riot outside of the Capitol that spilled into the Capitol. And it was really bizarre and really weird, and maybe there's something to the danger that the riot has posed. Meanwhile, we're not talking about the complicity of big tech. We're not talking about the cross-section of people who were at the Capitol. I have yet to see that completely identified and talked about, because most people want to go ahead and pretend like this thing was some aberration. And after January 20th, if we make it through, knock on wood, it'll be over. If we can just avoid violence on the 20th, like, we don't have to worry about any of this shit anymore. So they want to push that narrative. They want to push the narrative that the Republican Party is going to come around, and they'll probably wake up in a cold sweat any night now and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe we did all of that. We need to get right." It's so frustrating, and we deserve better than a country where this can happen. This doesn't happen in a country that works. First of all, Donald Trump would have never gotten the nomination, much less won the presidency, in a country that worked. This country screwed up. This country's messed up. This artificial austerity, this politics of spectacle, just the culture in general and the exploitation and manipulation of its people, it's messed up. We deserve better than that. And you never reach this point with a fascistic movement. I mean, you can have fascist movements, you can have rightward paramilitary groups that cause problems. They can even carry out terrorist acts. But you don't reach a point with like a massive part of a population being radicalized like this unless you have artificial austerity and shared society that's starting to fall apart. I talked about, if you haven't seen it yet, I talked about it on the Capital Putsch video that I did. This whole thing, it's been brewing for a very long time. And you cannot have inequality like this. You can't have exploitation like this. You can't have wealthy and powerful people creating alternate realities to get the rage that is rightfully theirs redirected to vulnerable populations and democratic institutions. You can't have it. We deserve better. We deserve better than this piss poor excuse for a country that we're in right now. Like, it's so absurd. We're watching this country fall apart and we're watching it decline, and we are suffering because of it. And it's an absolute shame. I keep talking to people who are around the world who just check in, you know, people in Europe, people in Asia who check in and they're like, I'm so sorry for what is happening in your country right now. And we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea why this is happening. And it's just so sad what has happened to America. I've heard from so many people that were like, I know that America had its problems and America had its scars and had, you know, its shameful moments in its history. But I used to look at America and think of it aspirationally. And they are just horrified by what's happening in this country. And here we are. We're living in this country where the empire is falling apart, the wheels are coming off the damn car, and we still can't wrap our heads around what is happening. We still can't look fascism in the eye. We can't look at this whole thing and say, okay, this is what's happening. And by the way, I think the canary in the coal mine has dropped dead at this point, and we have to take massive, radical, bold action in order to bring this thing back. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. I don't know about the rest of you. I was watching today people starting to talk about a living wage or even increasing the minimum wage, which is just a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And people are like, oh my God, do you really want to pay somebody who works at Taco Bell $15 an hour? Don't you want to humiliate them? Don't you want to ground them down into the ground with your boot? It's disgusting what's happened. The division in this country, how they've made us fight with one another over scraps, how they've made us distrust each other, how they've just reduced us to like backstabbing economic competitors. It's shameful. And I said this today and I stand by this. I think we should be having all these conversations. I think we should have aspirational debates in public so you can make people take a side on this stuff. Because this is an important thing, and I've talked about it on these streams before. Corporations, neoliberals, people like that, they know that it helps their economic interest to talk about progressivism and basic human decency. But when it comes time to talk about actual progressive reforms, they're like, oh, I don't know if we should. I don't know if people should have decent paying jobs. I mean, you know, what if I had to pay more for this phone? What if I had to pay a couple of dollars extra for my meals? Heaven forbid. What if it costs more to go to a restaurant when restaurants are open and I can't make somebody, maybe I can't punish someone based on my tips. You really want me to live in a country like that? Is that even a country worth living in? You want to back away from the abyss. You want to keep from jumping off this cliff. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. You treat people with basic human decency. You figure out a way to make this economy work. You hold people responsible who have been exploiting one another. That's how you make it work. That's how you keep from having this whole situation boil over. It pisses me off. It pisses me off to no end to watch this thing take off. But we're doing something good. I truly and honestly believe that. I think having these conversations, I'm having conversations with people I never thought I was going to have. I mean, I never thought I'd be in this position and watching the country suffer like this. But I'm having conversations with people about history, about politics, about theory. People are really getting into this stuff, and they're really starting to understand it. I even started to notice, and this is something I was excited about. I'm starting to see people share information about a lot of what we've been talking about. I'm starting to see stuff even go viral in places I didn't expect it to go, of people who are saying, you know what, I think there's more than meets the eye to what's going on in this country and its politics. And they're starting to understand that fascism is real. And they're starting to understand what fascism is and how it works and why America is in this situation. I'm having people who are saying, you know, I've been studying Reagan's presidency lately, and I've been looking at how they said one thing and they did another, and the entire society of spectacle. They're getting it. People are starting to understand. We got to keep telling people. We have to keep spreading this word and message, because it's the actual truth of what's going on. And the antidote to what is happening in this country. Everyone keeps saying to me, well, what can I do? First and foremost, tell people. Tell people what's happening in this country. Turn them on to actual information. Because I have to tell you, I'm working on a project right now where I'm going back through Western civilization and relearning history. And what I'm finding is this. There are these cycles of power and powerlessness where, I mean, my God, in the Middle Ages, like, people couldn't read. The only people who could read were clergy, who were telling them that they had to, be subservient and engage in fealty. And they were arrested in superstition. They couldn't read. They couldn't do anything. They had no real actual freedoms. They were completely exploited. But then they learned how to read, and then they organized. And they started having conversations with each other. And they're like, you know what? I think we've been lied to. I think this reality that we've been living in, I think that it's not real. I think that we've been sold a false bill of goods. And all of a sudden, when you start putting those things together, when you reach out to somebody and you say, hey, I've been doing a little bit of researching, or I heard this interesting thing the other day and it smacked of truth, it smacked of reality. When you start spreading the word to each other, it works because it's true. The problem right now is what happened at the Capitol. It was a bunch of people who were lost in an alternate reality, who have been sold a complete conspiracy theory, which, by the way, is what the powerful always use to throw people off their tracks. They say, no, it's not that I exploited you or that I took over the government. It's these people of color. It's this pedophile cabal. It's these liberal traitors over here. The problem is that's a lie. It looks a little bit like the truth, like the idea that there's somebody who is engaged in some sort of nefarious plan. But the problem is that the plan is by the powerful and the wealthy, who are spreading those conspiracy theories. And then they turn them into a fascist mob, and then all of a sudden the dog gets off the chain. You can set your watch by this shit. But the good news is, what we're talking about here, the reason why it's interesting, the reason why it feels like something, is because we have the truth on our side. The problem is that not enough people are talking about what the truth is. They're starting to piece together things. It's like I keep talking about solidarity. I keep talking about organizing and labor unions and stuff like that. Solidarity works when people start comparing notes and they start piecemealing together what is happening. And when you start piecemealing together what is happening, all of a sudden you have truth on your side and you can start to have a conversation. We can have massive change in this country. And I have to tell you, looking back at the Gilded Age and the Progressive Age, nobody thought that within a 10-year period they were going to get to direct election of senators, or that they were going to rein in these monopolies. But the ball started going. All of a sudden they started taking care of it. All of a sudden they started having conversations. All of a sudden they started marching in the streets. Then you get things like suffrage. Then you get things like reform. So tell people what's going on. Tell people what the truth is. Let them know you have people in your life, I assume, who are passionate, good people. They know that Donald Trump is disgusting. They know that the Republican Party is disgusting. They are really upset about what's happening in this country, but they don't have all the puzzle pieces yet. And how could they? Like, we know each other and we talk about this stuff, and my God, there are people who show up every week doing this thing. And God knows that I'm working gray into my beard doing this shit. Like, we're doing good work, but we haven't reached everybody, and we haven't had the major conversations with everybody. There are so many people who recognize that this thing sucks, and they recognize that something smells and something has to change. Spread the word. Tell them what's going on. I'm reading the comments. I'm reading the comments. I'm sorry, but this is the main solution. It's grassroots. It's bottom up. We have to stop waiting. We have to stop waiting on politicians to come in and save it for us. I think it's interesting, by the way, and we're going to get to questions here in a second because we have a lot to talk about tonight. I think it's interesting, by the way, and I assume that you've seen this too, that there's starting to be a backlash against like Marvel movies, superhero movies. There's a reason, and it's because we're tired of waiting on heroes to save us. We're tired of waiting on that. And we know that. We know that we have to save ourselves. We know that we have to do something. We know we have to come together. We know that we have to put 2 and 2 together and figure out it's 4 and then know what to do with it. Culturally, we're ready, man. There's so much kindling ready to go. This fire, this conflagration, it's ready to go. Ready to go. And if we just keep putting the numbers together, the letters together, the puzzle pieces together, we tell people, we turn them on to this stuff. If we keep working, if we keep chopping, we're going to get this thing figured out, and we're going to change things in a massive way. I kept saying that this is a moment. We're at the precipice of something. It can be really bad. It can be really, really bad. But it can be good too. There's always these moments, these crossroads where we can do something and we can change something. And you look back and you're like, my God, I can't believe life used to be like that. I can't believe that we used to have children working in factories. I can't believe that we used to have people locked into factories catching on fire and having to jump out of windows to save their lives. We can change things in a big, massive way. But we got a lot of work to do, ton of work to do, but I think we can do it. I really, truly, honestly think we can do it. All right, so we got some big questions tonight. We got to talk about this inauguration. We got to talk about what's happening with these conspiracy theories and fascism and Trump and all that stuff. And we're going to start here. So Julia said, what are your thoughts on the 12-minute New Yorker video? If you haven't seen it yet, you should watch this thing. I have to say that I think it's really, and this isn't surprising. I mean, listen, I cut my teeth sneaking into Trump rallies, and I can tell you that there was a massive difference between being in the Trump rallies and watching them on TV when you had a camera focused on Trump and that was it. There was a big difference being there than there was watching from that angle. It was the same thing at the coup attempt. All those angles on the outside that showed everybody swarming, it's like, oh my God, it's just a massive horde of people. This is madness. This is, mayhem. And the only thing that we really got in the moment was we got some pictures from the inside. Well, if you actually watch the video from the inside, it's so much worse than watching it like that. And it's also watching all the different groups. So there's people in there, by the way, who are running intelligence operations. They got in there to try and find shit to create more radicalization. They wanted to find smoking gun documents. They wanted to find things that they could leak to their followers. Other people just wanted to do it in order to, again, increase their followers. They were grifters. There are people who were play acting as revolutionaries, but then there are other revolutionaries. There are other people who were in there who had much more of a plan. And I keep saying this, and this is important. There were different groups at the Capitol, and they had different goals. One group was a bunch of MAGA tourists, is what I would call them. These are the people that, like in the videos, you see them walking around and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in the Capitol. This is crazy shit. Then you have the QAnon people who thought that they were going to go in and they were going to, I don't know, start the storm or the Great Awakening or whatever lie was running around in their circuits. Then you had white terrorists. You had white supremacists. You had paramilitary groups. And they were all in there running different operations. And you actually saw them meet each other, and they looked at each other. And this is important because one of the things that we like to do in this country is we like to paint everything with a real broad stroke. We like to say, well, everybody in that place was there together. And if you have ever been at a riot or a giant protest or some sort of an anarchic situation, you know that there are different groups of people. Some of them know each other, others don't. Maybe you're there with a group and all of a sudden other people show up. And then you have like a meeting of the minds. You have to start comparing notes. And one of the things that we saw here is we had a bunch of disparate people who were there for disparate purposes, who came together in that chamber. And I'm glad that Julia talked about this video, because if you watch it, you see them come together in this chamber and they have to do a very quick sort of introduction to one another. What are we doing in here? That's big. That's really, really big, because that shows us a couple of things. That shows us that these people are scattered, but it also shows us that they can find common cause, because the white terrorists, the paramilitary people, they used everybody else. They couldn't have done it themselves. They probably had a couple of thousands there. They used the tens of thousands of people in force to overwhelm everything. And you also noticed, I hope you saw this, you had people giving nonverbal communication. They had schematics. They were giving flag orders based on stuff. And you had other people who started pushing people toward things. They had plans. Those are the people that are really dangerous in all of this. Those are the people that we have to keep an eye on. Those are the people that we have to be wary of. It's whether or not they can go ahead and radicalize some of those other people, and whether they can find common cause with the other radicals that they came across in this entire thing. So that video is really telling, as are all of the on-the-ground videos. There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot that happened there. And I would actually say this. And I agree with you. I'm glad you said that, Douglas. There is a difference between anarchism and chaos. I said anarchic, which I wouldn't say anarchy. Anarchy is a different type of political philosophy. But I will say that a lot of what I've seen, and actually, there's somebody else. Okay, Susan says, where are the threats you're seeing from the far right? So here's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing a lot of movement in terms of how they're talking about this thing and how they're organizing and how they're trying to use it. First things first, and actually I'll go ahead and fold this in. Sarah says, what were the goals of the insurrection? There were different goals. Some of them literally wanted to get in and kill members of Congress. Other people thought they were actually going to turn over the presidential election. Then there were other people, like these white supremacists, white terrorists, paramilitary people. They wanted to get in there, and they wanted to create chaos. They wanted to destabilize the country, which, by the way, congratulations. They wanted to use this as a way to recruit people. I keep trying to tell people left and right, these people don't care about Donald Trump. They don't think Donald Trump is some kind of messiah or savior. They don't think that he's like some sort of like secret genius. They think Donald Trump was fantastic for mainlining white supremacy and culture and making sure that people could come out and say things and that they could feel comfortable saying whatever they wanted and spewing hatred wherever they wanted. Donald Trump was a hell of a radicalizing tool. He was great for recruitment. But they were really, really, really excited about the idea of getting a president in that wasn't Donald Trump. They want an enemy president. They do want a Joe Biden. That'd be great for them. And they're going to do better in an environment. So they got all the people. They've normalized white supremacy and paranoia, and all these conspiracy theories are just running rampant throughout culture at this point. They've got a bunch of people, and now they have a situation where they're going to have a president that they can go after. They're going to have a president that they can declare war on. The threats that I'm seeing are this. There is talk over the next few days. There is talk of hitting some capitals, which of course would be softer targets than the U.S. Capitol now. There are talks about possibly occupying other state capitals. There's talk of waiting until after the inauguration. Some people have talked about the possibility of hitting the inauguration. Some people are still pissed off about the Capitol thing, and they think that they have a score to settle. So I wouldn't be shocked to see some random violence, asymmetrical violence on inauguration day. But here's the concerning thing. They're talking a lot more about soft targets. What happened on January 6th was a lot of converging interests that just happened to converge upon one another. It's like that video that Julia was talking about. It's a bunch of people meeting in the chamber and realizing maybe they have common cause and understanding that they had different reasons for being there. Well, that's not a total coup situation. And people keep asking me, they keep saying, do I think that there was a massive conspiracy? No. I think we have to start moving away from that because quote unquote massive conspiracies take place later on once all of the chess pieces are moved around and people start recognizing. It's not two people playing chess. We have, my God, thousands of people playing chess in all of this. So we have some people in the government who are loyal to Donald Trump who didn't want to interfere with all these people that supported Donald Trump. There were other people in the government, I assume, that were like, well, if a coup happened, I wouldn't turn it down. There were members of the Republican Party who probably didn't necessarily want a coup, but they would be totally happy having a coup. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, I don't think, thought that he was going to get a coup that was going to keep him as president. He was just trying things. He's just making it up as he goes along. These conversations that Trump has had with like Flynn or this MyPillow asshole about, martial law or whatever, they're just ideas that float through his head. It's a big, weird thing. But what we found out on January 6th is that there are a lot of different ideas going on here, a lot of different motivations, a lot of different goals, and they just happen to coalesce with one another. And that there are people within the government, probably, my God, we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it with the police. We're seeing it with the military. We're seeing it with intelligence operations. We're seeing it with the damn Secret Service. This country has become so radicalized and so divided, intentionally, by the way, by the wealthy and the powerful, that there's no branch of the military or law enforcement that isn't lousy with this stuff. We have a lot of stuff going on and a lot of problems, and it's not going to get fixed until we start de-radicalizing and until we fix society and all the myriad of problems. So there's some people that were trying to pull off a coup, and other people were trying to use the possible coup attempt to destabilize the country and possibly recognize a white ethno-fascistic state. There's so much happening in this whole thing. And the fact that we're just treating it like, oh, there's a bunch of toothless hillbillies that got in there. Ha, ha, ha. Can you believe these people? The Al-Qaeda or whatever everyone's saying about it. It was not. People were taking private jets to this damn thing. This was a huge cross-section of the right. And it showed us that this is a weird phenomenon, and it is complicated and nuanced. And if it makes you feel better, or if it makes you sleep better at night to simply believe that it's just simple, I don't know what else to tell you, but it's not true. Ryan says how much of this has to do with the Christian right. A lot of it is the mindset of the Christian right. I know a lot of people who don't go to church, but they're Christian. It's a cultural thing. It's a white identity thing. That's like one of the things that like binds them together. And quite frankly, it's not a coincidence at all that things like QAnon and the deep state and Trumpism has trafficked through the evangelical white identity community. It has prepared them for this situation. It has made them pliable to this type of lie. because they've been told, like I was raised up in, they were told that there are all these conspiracies and they're involved in a spiritual war between divine good and evil. So there's a bunch of stuff going on. There's a bunch of reasons why this happened. And it's going to be, we might never know. We might never know everything that took place on January 6th. Why? Because the government's already dragging its feet about it, and the media wants to move beyond it. They don't really want to take a look at it because they really don't want to talk about white supremacy and or like the planned inequality that created this situation. And there are so many people who are paying so much money to try and hide their tracks and the fact that this was, in a lot of ways, completely created by the wealthy and the powerful to spur on fascism in order to hide what they've done and to move culpability from themselves to other people. That's the major story in all of that. That's the major story in all of this stuff. Then, Sarah, what was the goal? Kelly, can we talk about the number of people surprised to see educated, average-looking folks storming the Capitol? Absolutely. I have to tell you, it's been very frustrating for me because classism is just filthy in this country. People love it, and the left loves it too. It's one of the biggest detriments, this idea that everybody who hasn't moved out of middle America and doesn't live in New York City or Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles is some sort of backwater hillbilly or something. It's so disgusting. It's so disgusting. And because of all of the manipulation by the right, they look at them and they're like, I'm glad that their cities are falling apart. I'm glad their towns are falling apart. I'm glad they don't have health care. I'm glad they don't have jobs. I hope they die of COVID. And I have to tell you, I'm so sick as hell of people getting on and being like, oh, they went to a super spreader event. I hope they die. You hope my family dies. Cool. It's good to hear. Because I have to tell you, that as long as you continue with this classist mindset, you're not going to build any kind of a movement in this country. You're just not. There were a lot of wealthy people in the coup attempt. And a lot of them are pretty wealthy. I mean, you saw a ton of people who, chartered jets to this thing. You saw a bunch of people who are like business owners and influential members of their community, state legislators. You saw, I believe, officers in the military at this thing. By the way, weird number of intelligence officers, but that's neither here nor there. Not that we ever need to actually take a big look at how that played into all of this stuff. There's a bunch of really wealthy people who are more than happy to watch this country burn as long as it means a little bit more money for them. So yeah, people being surprised that it just wasn't like toothless hillbillies. Of course they thought that's what that was. They think that's what the problem is in this country, that there's just a bunch of stupid people in this country. If we could just get rid of them, everything would be perfect. If they could just go and secede and get away from us and we wouldn't have to be in the same country as them, everything would be great. Y'all people who believe that, you've been taught to embrace exploitation, period. And this goes back to the whole living wage thing, the whole minimum wage thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Oh, you're telling me people should be able to live if they work in a fast food restaurant? Yeah. Yeah, they should. And on top of that, I have to tell you, not everybody who didn't go to college is stupid. Not everybody who didn't go to college is dumb and incapable of going to college. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And we cannot let this become a system where somehow or another we think that, there's just a bunch of stupid people who don't know any better. Intelligent people get caught up in this stuff all the time. All the time. Tom, what'd you learn from the coup attempt? It was pretty telling to see that it was all across the board in the United States government and the Republican Party, which people were more than fine with a coup possibly happening. I knew that they were there. We all knew that they were there. I mean, when the reports started coming out that the Republicans were giving tours and logistical information, we weren't shocked, right? But it brought them out. It made them obvious who they were. I think this was a moment where somebody like a Ted Cruz, who has just been, play acting this role for so long. Like, I'm pretty sure that Ted Cruz, if a coup would have happened, he would have came out and been like, "Hello, comrades. Welcome to the revolution. Nice to meet you." I think what was made apparent on January 6th is that there are a lot of people who would be more than fine with an outright coup in this country. And by the way, I was also surprised by the fact that there are still people who, after an actual coup attempt, are still like, I don't think Trump's that bad. I think coup's probably the wrong word. I think, fascism. What are we doing here? What are we calling it? All this stuff. And then on top of it, like going back to what I was saying, it exposed just a lot of this stuff. It just made a lot of this stuff very, very clear. I thought that the coup attempt on January 6th was a very instructive moment. Very instructive moment. Susan, again, what are the threats you're seeing? I would say, again, I wouldn't be shocked if there was violence on Inauguration Day, but they're talking about a lot more soft targets. They're the people who are like really gearing up for this situation. They're in it for the long haul. Like, our media narrative is very, very short. This is why everyone's expecting something on inaugural day, is because they think, well, they hit on January 6th, so obviously 2 weeks later on the inaugural day, they'll go ahead and hit again, and that it's almost like sweeps week. They'll go ahead and they'll get this thing out of the way. It'll be great for TV. It'll be great for ratings, all that stuff. But that's not what these people are doing. They're in it for the long haul. They're in it for the long haul. And they're talking about soft targets. They're talking about recruitment ideas. A lot of them are really, really over the moon to have some sort of an oppositional presidency. They're very excited. Lori G says, who is funding? Great question. It'd be great if we could figure out where all the Bitcoin is coming from, but, it's Bitcoin and it's also coming from overseas. It's not like we have a massive international right-wing conspiracy, or that these groups are sharing information and they're helping each other. They're providing logistics. They're providing mobilized forces. They're giving them tactics. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we see something like the Capitol putsch in some other country here real soon. It'll probably look just like this thing. It'll probably follow the exact same game plan, all of it, because that's what's happening here. Brendan says, exactly what is it that's been gestating in our country's political unconscious to create the horrible situation we find ourselves in today? It's a great question. That's the $64,000 question. Here's the truth. We're also experiencing a massive mental health crisis in this country. The right, as a reactionary, fascistic, anti-democratic institution, is not well. What's happening here with all of these conspiracy theories, with all of this violence, a lot of it comes from, my God, a lot of psychosexual dysfunction. You have a lot of people who hate themselves. They hate who they are. And because of their morality systems, maybe their faith-based systems, their political systems, their societal surroundings, all of it, they're not well. They're not doing great. I mean, Donald Trump, I think, is just at the forefront of this. I mean, anybody who looks at Donald Trump and does it in like just an open-minded way, you look at him and you go, oh, I feel bad for this guy. Like, he is fucked up. He is not well. And you look at him and you realize, like, this, and it's like when I talk to Mary Trump, like, this is a person that has been really, really messed up through abuse. Yeah, it's such a giant mess. And until you start prioritizing mental health, mental wellness in this country, it's just going to keep going and going and going. I mean, fascism is not a movement filled with healthy people. Toxic masculinity is absolutely part of it. White supremacist paranoia. It's so much of this has to do, and this is a big thing, and I talk about this all the time only because it's important. It's a lot of people who are playing a role. They're pretending to be something that they wish that they were, and they're insecure about who they are and what they believe and what they feel, so they have to play this role. And then eventually they get caught up in the role, and it's incredibly unhealthy. Not to mention that capitalism at this stage has just alienated everybody from one another. It's made people like lonely. It's made people addicted to one thing after another, whether or not it's substances or disinformation and radicalization. It's not a good situation. It's not a great situation in this country. And fascism is always a reaction and a manifestation of all of those problems. It's a big mess. I mean, if you have these people in your family, if you've come across these people, you just hear them ranting about this stuff, the conspiracy theories, everything's against me, and they just start spouting off all this stuff. Reptilians, JFK Jr. is alive, all this stuff. It's not great. Not great. They're watching Disney movies trying to find secret codes to secret plans and secret organizations. Oh my God, it's really, really bad. So Brendan, it's a big, giant mental health issue that we're dealing with. It's massive. Democrats can't talk about real fascism, because to actually talk about fascism, you have to talk about what's going on in this country and how we've arrived at this point. If you start talking about how we've arrived here, which is something that we do, you start to realize that the economic consensus of the past few decades is a lie, and that the mythology that we've all been, swimming around in, this toxic mythology of American exceptionalism, is a lie. They want to go ahead and they want to tamp down fascism, and they want to tamp down the right, but they don't want to get rid of the idea that America is the best country in the world. This isn't who we are, and there's nothing Americans haven't been able to do when we come together. Remember Normandy, remember D-Day, remember when we fought fascism, all that shit. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. The Real Snark says, what role, if any, do you think paid mercenaries had in the attack on 1-6? That's a great question. I haven't heard much in the way of ideas of what might have happened with Prince and that whole group. But if I heard about that tomorrow, if all of a sudden a news story came out and it turns out that there were mercenaries, paid people who were doing this, I would not be shocked. You wouldn't either. I mean, because Trump more or less had a private intelligence group with Eric Prince. I guarantee that they have been a part of this. I guarantee that these mercenaries, who, by the way, populate a lot of these paramilitary groups, whether it's the 3%ers or otherwise, I assume that some of those dudes were at the Capitol. I would be shocked to hear that they weren't. Not to mention, that would also make a lot of sense of how members of Congress were sort of triangulating with them. I would not be I would not be shocked at all. I haven't heard anything about it yet, but that would be a possibility for sure. Linda, are we past the point where it even matters if Republicans repudiate the big lie? Yeah, we're past that point. And I thought that was interesting over the past few days. Everyone's like, well, Republicans need to come out and get behind a microphone. They need to say that this has been a lie for a while. And that's not going to do much. We all know this. There's the moment where if you start speaking out against this, even if you're one of the leaders, you're in the deep state. I mean, look like what happened to Mike Pence. Mike Pence has been part of this thing from the beginning, and they were calling for hanging him. Like, they were talking about putting him in front of a firing squad. No, the Republicans can't come out and say that anymore. They can't come out and say, even if they came out and said, by the way, we were just lying, guys. We're sorry about that. That sucks. It sucks that we've gotten to this point. They would just become the deep state. They would become traitors. Obviously, they have compromising video of them. They wouldn't do anything at this point. They created this thing. I keep talking about it. The right and the wealthy and the powerful, they create fascistic movements. They use them for power and profit and control, and then the dog gets off the chain. Well, I never thought it was going to get to this point. I mean, it always gets to this point. You cannot control fascistic movements that radicalize people. You can't control them. As we've seen, their conspiracy theories will turn on you like that. So no, if they come out and they say it's been a big lie all along, like we'll applaud them, and I'm sure the mainstream media will be like, this is a profile in courage, even though they spent years creating this lie. But they're not. That doesn't get rid of it. It's not going to fix it. You know. A cat found something and is meowing in the background. Stop it all. What's it been like to report on all of this and to see it coming? Weird. It's been really weird. This isn't what I expected to be doing at this point in my life. I didn't expect for this to be my life. I didn't plan on talking about all this stuff. I didn't plan on following politics like this. I didn't plan on writing books about how the country arrived at this point. It's been weird. I'm tired. Really, really tired of this shit. I'm tired of I wanted things to get fixed, and I wanted things to go the right way, and I just want things to get fixed. And I thought maybe it would be fixed after 2016, and maybe then like this fascistic movement that I was watching, maybe it'd go away. And then I realized very, very quickly, I was like, no, that's not what's going to happen. And the more that I studied it, the more I started to understand it, and the more I realized that we were in a lot of trouble. But it's been a lot, dealing with threats, dealing with intimidation, dealing with people stalking me, dealing with people threatening me. It's been weird. It's been really, really weird. But I'm glad I can play a role. I'm glad I can play a part in it. I'm glad I can fight and help. I'm glad I'm not just on the sideline. We're in a moment of real crisis. I'm glad that I can play a role in it. And that's good. I'm glad I can do that. And I'm appreciative of all of you. I have to tell you, I felt alone. I felt alone for a while. Like when I first started reporting on this stuff and writing about this stuff, you have Twitter or whatever, but I'm really glad that we do these talks and the podcast and all of that stuff. Like it's meant a lot to me to have people to chat with and share this with and go through it with. So it was very, very lonely and weird there for a while, particularly as I was saying that this was a fascistic, dangerous movement, and all the media types were like laughing, and it was hilarious to them, and it was just a big joke, and look how hyperbolic these people are and alarmist these people are and how unserious they are, and they just thought it was hilarious. They thought it was so funny. They thought it was so funny that we were telling people that it was dangerous. Jaeger says the bigger threat, paramilitaries attacking the inauguration or paramilitaries attacking state capitals. I could see this turning into a state situation, particularly, places like Michigan, where a lot of these people are. There's some in Tennessee, those types of places. I could see the state capitals, something happening there. Or again, soft targets. When we eventually get out of quarantine and when we eventually are able to go outside. I think that's when a lot of this is going to pick up, unfortunately. Quest Mercenary, what do you think is going to happen leading up to the inauguration? Has the government responded sufficiently with enough security? Yeah, I think so far they have. I still would not have the inauguration outside. I mean, I think that's just poking the bear and taking unnecessary chances, particularly in the time of the pandemic. So I think that security has been good so far, but there's still dangers. And we also know, again, that there are members of this in the government, people who are in charge of security who can't be trusted. They've already stood down, and we don't know yet why they stood down. And we don't already know who's all done it and who's all a part of it and whether or not it's grown. So no, I wouldn't continue with it as usual. Britt, what's your take on social media companies purging Trump and QAnon? That's a big question. I'll say this first and foremost. I think it is pretty disgusting that Twitter and Facebook built their platforms on Donald Trump, and that they juiced him for years for profit and influence. I mean, he didn't just incite violence. I mean, we've had bombing attempts, we've had murders, we've had huge amounts of radicalization and intimidation, and him trafficking in one crazy conspiracy theory after another. They made so much money off of Donald Trump. And the media made so much money off Donald Trump. And then for them to pull the plug like right before his presidency was over, and then for everyone to be like, oh, great job. What a patriotic step. They got everything they wanted out of him. And then they had a moment where they were like, I think this is going to look really good if we go ahead and say enough is enough. It was opportunistic. I said it, I believe, the night that it happened. It's like all the energy companies who know that global climate change is real and that a climate catastrophe is looming. They know that it's coming. They have like a date, and they're like, we can profit wildly up to this point. And after this point, we should say that we want to be part of the problem, and we're going to come out and we're going to be like, we want to be part of the solution. And that's when they'll profit off the solution. So that's what's happened here, is it was like a PR move. I also think that it is really concerning that these private companies have the power to simply deplatform the president of the United States of America. Like, everyone was so relieved that they took away Trump's Twitter account and his Facebook account that they didn't talk about the fact that they were able to exercise power based on what they wanted, based on their own decision. They just said, yeah, go ahead and get rid of that. That's nuts. And I'm really, really uncomfortable about the idea that these corporations can just silence people whenever they want. That's weird. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have done it. They absolutely should have done it because he was dangerous. But it's really, really scary what big tech is capable of doing. They need to be put in check. They need to be broken up. They need to be treated like utilities, and they need to be broken up. But I'm telling you, they're not ideological. This is an important thing. They're post-political. When you reach a certain point of wealth and influence and power, you're not left and you're not right. You're beyond politics. You're looking down on politics. And I keep saying this. Facebook helped the right because that's where their money was made, because their platform was going to make the most money and profit by trafficking in right-wing misinformation and conspiracy theories. If they would have made more money using left-wing ideas, they would have had Che Guevara on every page. They're not actually political. They're not ideological. They think that they can control society by tweaking an algorithm here or there. It also should be pointed out in all of this that these are corporations who poisoned democratic society through misinformation because they wanted people to be addicted to their platforms. The fact that this isn't a conversation that a lot of people are having anymore is really, it's really, really quite crazy that we're not talking about that. Kind of crazy. Salmon and Rich, will deplatforming the right radicalize them? Probably, but they should be deplatformed. I'm sorry, but you can't get on there and you can't incite violence. You can't go on there and, I don't know, undermine public health regulations and lead to hundreds of thousands of people dying without, repercussions. Like, there is a limit on free speech when it comes to this shit, and like, these companies should be able to throw them off if they want to. The problem is the fact that they have the power to do that. That's neither here nor there. But it's going to radicalize them. If they can figure out a way to make Parler work, if they can attach it to a car battery or something and jumpstart it, they'll figure it out and it'll radicalize them further. It makes them feel like they're persecuted. So much of this has to do with social media. The idea that they're not getting enough likes, retweets, any of that stuff, they think they're being shadow banned or whatever. It's perceived persecution. So it will feed into their narrative. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be deplatformed. My God, they should absolutely be deplatformed. It's a big, giant problem. I am not drinking wild turkey. I am drinking High West Rye is what I'm drinking. So we're getting ready to get to 1 hour, and we're going to finish this glass off and get some more. But yeah, it's just crazy that we have this thing in our society that we're not really talking about, and how it works and what it does. It's very strange. It's very, very strange. Wild turkey. That's funny. I am reading. I keep an eye on the comments while this thing happens. Absolutely, I do. It's cold in Blue, Georgia tonight. I'll tell you why. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Cheers. Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate y'all. But they do. They really love perceived persecution, and that's been motivating the right for forever, and that's been motivating the Christian right for forever as well. I told this story, I think, on another live stream or a podcast or something along those lines. And I found this in researching my book. It was like at the beginning of Christianity as a movement, they were looking around looking for opportunities to become martyrs. And they bothered the governors of Rome so much to be martyred that the governors were like, you wretches, if you want to die, go hang yourself, jump off a cliff. Don't make me do it. I'm tired of killing Christians. It was the motivating factor of the entire movement. I mean, they have a martyr as a Messiah, and then they just kept going. So yeah, it's all about perceived persecution. It's one of the reasons why these things are all interconnected. Keith, does right-wing violence do anything to eradicate right-wing media? I think that one of the things that we're seeing, I think Dominion is really leading the charge on this thing. They're just so tired of people saying that, that they tried to steal an election or that they're part of a conspiracy. They're just suing people. And all of a sudden you're seeing like Newsmax, they're like, we're really sorry about our reporting that said that Dominion did this. And we do need to retract the story that we said that Dominion employees were changing votes. And we're really sorry about that. Get after it. I'm sorry, but Fox News has killed so many people in this pandemic. And I would love to see some sort of a class action lawsuit with people who have lost loved ones to the pandemic because they watched Fox News. And it wouldn't be hard to contact trace like these people dying in the pandemic to Fox News. All you got to do is get on their Twitter page or their Facebook page and see what's been happening and, just trace it from one to another. I would love to see a class action lawsuit against Fox News. I think that's a long time coming. And I think this whole thing with the pandemic, they're to blame for this. That's not a bad point. The fact that Trump knew what had happened with this pandemic, I would love to see a lawsuit of people who lost family members and loved ones because they went to Trump rallies, even though Trump knew full and well. I mean, you can prove that he was in those briefings. You can prove that Fauci and all of these scientists were telling him what was going on. And you have the phone call with Bob Woodward. Obviously, he knew what was going on. So sue him. Yeah, that would be great if Kane's family sued Trump. Get after it. Get after it. I mean, really, there is a limit. They knowingly put people's lives at risk. So that's something. I think that's something. No to 45. I've heard you say before this moment is because of twin crises in mental health and education. Can you talk about that? I already talked about mental health, but education's a massive part of this. The way that we teach history and the story that we learn, it's on purpose. You know that, right? You know that public education has been intentionally undermined in order to create a working class that doesn't ask questions and doesn't know what's going on or aren't able to compare notes, and they make better exploitable employees, right? That's intentional. You also know that because public education was desegregated, the right tried to destroy it. That way that they could, fill their private academies with privileged white kids and they could have segregation again. Those things were on purpose. I mean, that's why Betsy DeVos was Secretary of Education. That's what she was doing. She was trying to kill public education. Not to mention, by the way, and if you'll forgive me a second, if you'll indulge me, I'm a liberal arts professor, and I can tell you that higher education has been intentionally plundered. Prices of tuition have gone through the roof. I'm sitting here talking to you with God knows how much student debt because I came from a poor family that couldn't afford college. And why did they do it? Why did we create a system? Number one, I mean, you make more money. You're going to get so much more money off the government, by the way, with financial aid. But also, people who have a ton of student debt are kind of afraid of losing their jobs. They don't really step out of line as much. They're probably not going to look around for another job because they need to make sure that they can make their student debt payments. They bring you out and they have you over a barrel. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose. So we've also reached a point where we're trying to make sure that people don't have critical thinking skills. How in the hell, by the way, are we in 2021 and it's not already part of the curriculum nationwide to learn how to evaluate internet sources? Think about that. The internet, I got my first email account in 1995. Whew, it's been a little while. 25 years? My math is rusty. I had a little bit of whiskey tonight. 25 years, 26 years now. That's long enough to start actually teaching in public schools how to evaluate internet sources. Why would that not happen? Why is that not something we do? Why are our history courses diluted? Why are our curriculums like major battles that the Republicans have taken on? Which, by the way, Republicans have up and down the board. They have fought so many battles that the left has left alone, including local elections, state elections, school board elections, curriculum battles, all of it. This is stuff that we have to get in the fight for. We should be going to these education board meetings. We should be dealing with this stuff. We have to. So we got to deal with this. And a big part of it is education. We need people going to school. And by the way, I don't blame people for like hating higher ed or hating academics or, intellectuals or whatever. It's just not a great situation. You have a choice. You either go and you take on tens of thousands, if not $100,000 worth of student debt in order to get a degree that you don't even know is going to get you a job necessarily. It's a stupid deal. It's a stupid deal. It's a rotten deal, and it needs fixed. The student debt crisis is an absolute just blemish on American society. And it has put us in a terrible situation. And by the way, for anybody who's like, well, I don't think we should forgive student debt, I'm not getting anything out of it. It's going to help society. It will actually help the economy. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And a big part of this is the educational system has been intentionally undermined at every step along the way. Groggy Bones. Hi, Jared. Hope you're well. Hope you're well, Groggy. Big question. How do we shift our focus on drawing back on American hegemony and dismantling the military-industrial complex? First things first, people have to understand that there is a military-industrial complex. This is hugely important to point out. National security, the military state, all of it, total shams. It's just a redistribution project. It takes money from us, sends it up, and then sends it out to a bunch of contractors and a bunch of different people. It just takes money from us, redistributes it, which is why it's so funny when the right talks about redistribution of wealth. It's what they've been doing for decades now. It doesn't make us any safer. It actually makes us less safe. Isn't it weird we're in the middle of a pandemic and we can't actually take care of ourselves? Or, I don't know, maybe a few thousand people overran the Capitol. Where were our Harrier jets at that point? Isn't that weird? Isn't that odd? The American hegemonic project has gotten us into so much trouble, and it has just absolutely undermined the idea of what America is. We should not be going around the world overthrowing governments. We shouldn't be assassinating democratically elected officials. We shouldn't be engaging in this shit. We shouldn't be exploiting people. We have to back away from empire. Hegemony is when you want control over other things. Hegemony in world affairs is where America says, guess what? We know better than everybody else. We are the heroes of human civilization. And so we want the world to work based on our ideas because our ideas are right. That's what exceptionalism is all about. It's the idea that we are the heroes of human civilization, and so everything has to work according to us. And by the way, if you are interested, if we're going to finish this up here in a bit, if you're interested in learning more about this, go and look at the Project for a New American Century. And if you look at it, and if you look at U.S. military planning, particularly at the turning of the millennium, and this was back during Clinton's presidency, the main goal of American foreign policy was continuing American dominance and making sure that no other threat could possibly ever pop up around the world, which meant that we had to shore up oil, we had to shore up major resources, we had to make sure that there was no way whatsoever for anybody ever to challenge us again. And there were people, and this is absolute insanity, there were people who thought that we were just going to rule the world forever. It wasn't going to be just the American century. It was going to be, I don't know, 1,000-year Reich, something along those lines. It took our money, it took our focus, and it took our soul. You can't fight all of these wars. You can't oppress people of color around the world. You can't engage in crusades without it radicalizing you, without it turning you into something else. And that's what it did. I always try and tell people it's not like we won the Cold War. Russia bled out first. We dealt each other mortal blows. And unless we start realizing that and we realize that we have to change this country and be better, we're deep, deep shit. So yeah, this American hegemony project has to be rolled back. And I would love to see us start to work with other people, partnerships. And this is important, one of the things that has helped America become the quote unquote most powerful country in the world is this global economic system of exploitation. First countries, second countries, third countries. You know, your country exists to make sure that we get the stuff to make computers. Your country exists so we can get oil. Your country manufactures it. We'll use factories in your country and then we'll import them over here and then our people will buy it cheap at the Walmart because you don't pay your people and you engage them in exploitive slave labor. That project is reaching its conclusion. That project doesn't work. And that project has reached its final terminal point. That's why we're in this problem. I said this in my Capital Putsch video. When capitalism starts to be really, really troubled, the capitalists find fascists in order to fight off leftists who want reform. That's the stage that we're in. The car is running out of gas. It's starting to jerk and spasm. We need to pull the car over. We need to change things. We have to back away from hegemony and we have to find a better way to live. We can't exploit people like this anymore. We got to have a better, more human world. And all it's going to take, and I know that this is massive and it makes it sound small when I say all it's going to take is reimagining how we work and reimagining how the world works and working through history. And I have to tell you, it's been really, really hard reading world history, but it actually makes a lot more sense when you look at it, which is you live in these cycles. And when you're in one cycle, you're like, the world could never be different. Nothing could change. Feudalism is going to last forever. Monarchies are going to last forever. Oh, we're in the next cycle. Suddenly it's capitalism and representative government. Oh, we're in representative government and capitalism and global capitalism and American hegemony. Things could never be different. They're going to change. We're on the precipice of change. It's going to change one way or another. You have to make the choice of what that change is going to be. The next cycle is either going to be a return to fascism and feudalism and top down powerless economics, or we're going to have a better, more human future. Those are the choices. Two. That's it. That's it. You make a choice. Todd says we're losing at the informational warfare. How do we rein it all in? You use the truth. And that's the big thing here. And I know that sounds glib, but it's true. You got to start telling people the real story instead of, you got to tell people the real story instead of relying on these old tired mythologies. Because the old tired mythologies are falling apart and they allow conspiracy theories because people want to say it. People want to hear the truth at this point. LA Raider, how do we address the fact that the right wing has been using religion as a tool? I'll say this. Christianity needs to fix itself. I am actually really hopeful to see that there are reformers who recognize that white identity Christianity is not only dangerous, but is like one of the most dangerous things in the world. And I actually think that there is a possibility that there is going to be reform there. Meanwhile, what we have to do is we need to continue to tell people, hey, I know that you think that religion is religion, but it's not. People were so shocked when they started learning about Christian nationalism. It's bullshit. It's about power and profit and influence. But we have to start calling this thing what it is, which is a power-hungry, white supremacist, neo-Confederate movement. I talk about this all the time with the cult of the Shining City. That's what we're dealing with. It's not even Christianity. It's a perversion of it. It's a weaponized white supremacist version of it that is a holdover from the Confederacy. It's important that we call it what it is, we understand it, we learn about it, and we stop just calling it Christianity and pretending like it's just fine. And how could they possibly ever support Donald Trump? Well, if you're paying attention, you know why they're supporting Donald Trump. If you pay any attention to it whatsoever, you know why they're supporting Donald Trump. Bog Toggle says, I naturalized about 10 years ago. Congrats to a decade, by the way. I'm still learning. Your book arrived today. Oh, cheers on that. Thank you. I'm hearing, by the way, speaking of American Rule, I'm hearing from people who bought it for their family members, who are Trump supporters, right-leaning, and even some people who I guess you'd call neoliberal or, might not hang out on Bourbon Talk on a Sunday. I'm hearing from people who got it for those people for Christmas, and apparently it's helping. Apparently it's starting to get through to some people because, again, it speaks of truth. It's not made up. It's not tinfoil hat bullshit. It's actually talking about power versus powerlessness and manipulation. So apparently it's working, which is nice. Makes it worth it. I'm hearing what we're seeing is widely viewed as gestating with Reagan. Could you please explain? Very, very quickly. And, we can't get into the whole Reagan thing. Maybe I'll have a night where I just sit down and do a whole Reagan thing. Reagan came in the 1980s and served as sort of a pitchman for the dismantling of the New Deal. And the New Deal, which of course was a reaction to economic crisis in the 20s and 30s and the erosion of consumerist America, the New Deal came in, it put in some reform that fixed the stock market and fixed the economy and made sure, because these people always destroy the economy and it always takes down everyone and it lowers lifespans and it makes life a living hell. And the whole point here is that this system has always been unstable, and it just always destroys itself because the wealthy and powerful can't help themselves. They can't stop. It was never about being sustainable. It was always about just pushing the pedal to the metal and hoping somebody else will fix things up later on. So this stuff gets taken care of with the New Deal. It starts being eroded, of course, with the Red Scare and the House of Un-American Committees, which was all about focusing on New Dealers and getting them out of showing ankles. G-rated. Cheers to that. Sorry, I'll get my ankles. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right, we're good. Don't want to get it too crazy on a Sunday night. So it's late. It's not that late. So Reagan comes around. He's the pitch man for the idea that America is being held back and our economy is wonderful and nobody should worry about regulation, and let's make some money and let's get the government out of your business, and the wealthy and the powerful have this. They'll take care of it. And so he basically is just the pitch man for a bunch of right-wing think tanks and libertarian faithful. They come in, they get rid of all of the regulation, all of the New Deal thoughts that are happening in this country, and they create an entire situation where the social safety net is absolutely destroyed, government as a public good is completely eradicated, and this is a problem, eventually the Democratic Party, after he's reelected in a landslide, the Democratic Party sits down and they're like, we're never going to beat Reaganism. We're never going to be able to actually take on the economic idea that Reagan and the people behind him have presented. So we have to be Reaganism with a smiling face. And so you actually see the Democratic Party start to run against the Republican Party on the right a lot of times. Clinton actually made the argument more or less that he was the rightful heir to Reagan over George H.W. Bush. And so what ends up happening in this country is we have this vast accelerated race to inequality. And so you have a bunch of people who are seen as lazy, unworthy, and a lot of this is racist, a lot of it's misogynistic, because of course it is. And they start falling behind, and people say that they deserve to fall behind, and they don't deserve decency, they don't deserve much of anything. And then you have the Republican Party that looks at the Democratic Party, that they are in agreement in an economic consensus, and they are going to start losing elections because the Democrats presented in a better way. So they have to start calling them socialists, liberals, radicals, because that's the old playbook. And it pushes the Republican Party further right. So it just drags the entire American political sphere farther and farther to the right until the right has to embrace fascism. Straight up, unvarnished conspiracy theory, baked at the core fascism. And so it just kept going and going and going. And then eventually, I'm glad somebody said NAFTA and reminded me, you have free trade, which of course hollows out middle America and leaves a bunch of people wondering, why in the world is my life worse when I live in America, the greatest country in the world? And then the wealthy and the powerful, who hollowed out America and made sure that their lives will not be better than the people who came before them, tell them, hey, we didn't do it. It's a conspiracy. It's the New World Order. And then a couple of years later, it's the deep state or QAnon or whatever. It's the exact same fascistic conspiracy theory. And it always happens when countries that believe themselves to be exceptional start falling apart. So those are the cliff notes. There's a lot to talk about there. A lot of meat on that bone. Michelle, you said if the government provides jobs and health care to those without, then it will tamp down the Trumps. But some of the terrorists flew to D.C. on private jets and are very well off. Can you speak to how to deprogram 70 million cultists? Yeah, you can't. You can't deprogram all of them. This is going to be about we have to do so many different things at once. My God. We have to tamp down radicalism with the people who have been exploited, as I was just talking about. I keep saying, if you want to make millions of Americans who don't believe in climate change believe in climate change, give them jobs fighting climate change. Get them manufacturing solar panels and wind turbines and alternative energy or whatever. So you can actually start to get some of those people to not be radicalized because their material conditions would improve, which, by the way, and I think the coup attempt on the 6th is really, really important as a way to understand a metaphor. Those white supremacists, those white terrorists, those paramilitary people, they couldn't have gotten into the Capitol if they didn't have all the other people behind them who didn't even know what they were doing. So those people, if you can start making sure that some of those people don't show up at the Capitol, some of those people don't come to DC, then all of a sudden they can't jump in the Capitol because they use them. They know better. They know the manipulation. They're manipulating, right? So if you can actually start to de-radicalize some of those people, it can get better on one front. You're not going to deprogram all these people. You're always going to have a society that's going to have elements that are racist, misogynistic, and fascistic. You just have to de-radicalize to the point where those people don't pick up enough speed, momentum, and support in order to overthrow your society. It's a really complicated thing. I don't remember where it was, but I think it was on the Strange Days podcast. It's like in those movies when you see people trying to dismantle an explosive, and there's so many different wires, and you have to choose which wires to cut and which ones to leave intact. This is a really complicated process. There's no silver bullet answer, but you can de-radicalize some of them, but you are not going to de-radicalize 70 million of them. It's just not going to happen. Mercedes, how do we clean up our institutions of these far right military, police departments, and government officials? You got to take it seriously. I mean, first and foremost, the first step in any sort of like actual reckoning in the political spectrum is that the left and the Democrats and the media have to call it what it is. They have to say, hey, we have a white supremacist problem. It has infected law enforcement and our institutions. You have to start with that conversation, because one of the things that has to happen is you have to start realizing there's a problem in order to address the problem. Otherwise, it lies in the shadow and it continues to grow and fester. So you have to admit it's a problem, start talking about it. And once you admit it's an issue, all of a sudden it starts to change. We all think that progress can't happen or that things can't change, but they change all the time. You just simply have to believe that it can change and start moving to make action happen. So that's kind of a part of this, I think. I think that's right. I think the consequences from this whole thing, people have to be arrested first and foremost. They have to be held accountable. But I also think it's really dangerous for us to start talking about like anti-terrorist legislation or like, I don't know, Patriot Act stuff, because it's not going to be used against the people that they say it will be used against. It'll just be turned on the left. That's all that will happen there. All right, last question here, and then we'll wrap up for the night. Halle Belly, isn't it all about messaging going forward? Biden and Harris have put forth bold plans and promised truth. What do you see as pitfalls for them? I would say the pitfall is thinking that this thing is going to be over after January 20th. It's not. This is an ongoing battle. I hate to tell you, I thought for a while that like after 2016, like I'd hang up my coat and hat and I'd be done and I could just walk away and not pay attention anymore. We can't not pay attention, because we have let politics become a spectacle, something to observe, something to watch on the TV. We can't do that. Like if this hasn't woken you up for the rest of your life, I don't know what to tell you, because politics demands our attention. It demands our participation. And it has to, we have to be active and we have to be aware and be vigilant. I agree. I think these plans that have been rolled out, I have a couple of issues here and there. About the plans that have been rolled out, but that's neither here nor there. I'm an honest broker. I'll call it out where I see it. Going forward, I'm gonna critique this administration when I think it needs critiqued. I think this is a good start. Emphasis on start, but you cannot pretend like America is not in the middle of an existential crisis, because it is. It's in an existential crisis. So I think the pitfall would be pretending like everything's fine and that we just need to return to normal, and that Trump was an aberration because he's a symptom. He's not the problem. There's a much, much larger problem. You have to be big, you have to be bold, you have to take actual steps to improve material conditions in this country, and also back away from hegemony like we talked about. And if we don't do that stuff, this thing's only going to go worse. But I think I think we're going to beat this thing. Again, I keep saying that, but it's true. I think we are going to beat this thing. I think we're going to get there. I think that's important too. Mia says America was actually fascist black people through entire history. I completely agree with that. That's the problem. We think that this is some sort of thing that is just popping up, but no, it's not. America from the very beginning has been just absolutely steeped in fascistic, white supremacist, paranoid conspiracy theories that have made sure that we can exploit people of color and women and LGBTQ Americans left and right. It's been that way from the very, very beginning, and occasionally it gets better, and then occasionally it gets worse, and then other times it reaches like a peak. And we've seen this. We saw this in the 1920s and 1930s after the economic crash. Fascism grew in this country. They had a massive movement. It could have taken over into the country, but the New Deal and eventually mobilization into World War II curbed it off. And then we've had it over and over again with possibilities that it could erupt and take over. And we're here again. We're here again. And we can get back. We can get back and we can fix it. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out. I'll finish with the cheers. Yeah, we'll finish with the cheers. Here on the Muckrake Podcast, I think we have a pretty good guest tomorrow. If you haven't already, go over to patreon.com/Muckrake Podcast. You can get special stuff, including the extra show at the end of the week. I think it's a pretty good, different kind of a show. If you haven't already, check out my Capital Pooch video. I think it did a pretty good job of bringing this thing together. I meant it to be a primer so that people who don't understand what's going on, maybe people who don't attend these things, maybe people who don't listen to the podcast or read the books, people who know that something's wrong and that something's weird. I think that hopefully presentation that I did, the Capital Pooch video, maybe it will help. So if you haven't already, if you have people in your life who don't know what's going on, or people who think that something's weird or feel that something's odd, give it to them, let them know. Hopefully they'll figure this thing out, because it's the truth. So we have truth on our side in that regard. We're going to fix this thing. I appreciate all of you so much. Here's to beating fascism, better, realer human future. All right, everybody. We'll be back. I'm going to do some videos this week. I'll probably react to the inauguration and whatever happens this week. If you haven't already, subscribe so you can get these videos when I do them. I'm going to be back next week for a bourbon talk to talk about the inauguration and whatever happens this week. Hopefully, maybe after that, I can have a week off where we can all just sort of chill out, have a deep breath, and then get ready for the fight going forward. I appreciate all of you so much. Hey, it's going to be a weird week. It's a really tenuous, weird week. Be safe, stay vigilant, be good. Take care.